So today we're doing a little bit of a potpourri lesson. And we've done a couple of these already, so hopefully you're familiar with what that means. But potpourri, if you've ever been to a place where they have like dried flowers and spices and things in a bowl and it smells nice. It's just like a mixture of stuff. So that's why we call it potpourri, in case you're not familiar with the word. So island potpourri, we're kind of touching on a bunch of different places today. And they're not as commonly traveled to, both by clients and when I ask this question in class. But has anyone been, now that we've got more people who've signed on after the quiz, has anybody been to Fiji, French Polynesia, also sometimes known as Tahiti, Maldives, or Seychelles? If you haven't been, where would you like to go most? If this is your first time hearing about some of those places, that's okay too. So, like I said, it's less frequently where people have been. And the reason is because some of the costs of both getting there and staying there can be pretty high. So the transportation sector that you use to get to these places can be a little high in cost, and the accommodation in these places can be very expensive as well. The cost of living might not be especially expensive for people who live there, but most of these places are known for more luxurious travel. So let's go first to our map you saw this last week when we looked at Australia and New Zealand. So some of the islands we'll study are in this map, are shown on this map. There's a couple that are not. They're over in the Indian Ocean. But here we are looking at the South Pacific, also known as Oceania. Sometimes people call the whole area Australia, the continent of Australia, which is a bit less accurate. So I like to call it the South Pacific. That's what you'd hear most often in the industry. If you see brochures or websites or tour companies that are cruise lines that say, where do you want to travel? And you choose by destination, it will say North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, South Pacific. That's usually what you would see is South Pacific. So tons and tons and tons of different islands down here. Of course, we talked about lots of them last week, including those ones that share an island, like the island of New Guinea, which is shared, the island of Borneo, which is shared over here. We talked about countries that share islands a couple weeks ago. But the ones that we're talking about today, we'll look at Fiji, like I said, and a couple others. Now, when you look at this specific area of the world, time zones generally run north to south on what they call the lines of longitude, which are these blue lines you see here that go up and down like this. Okay, now ideally, if you had equal time zones, they would be on every one of those lines. So from this line to this line would be an hour difference, for example. Or if you take, well, depends on how zoomed in we are here. But in any case, there are 24 time zones in the world. Strictly speaking, there are exceptions, including in Canada, where Newfoundland is kind of halfway in the middle of two. That's why they're on the half hour. But the point is that in this part of the world, you have what they call the international date line. And it's not a straight line because there's so many countries in the middle of all of this. So it kind of goes this way and then that way at times. And it's kind of interesting. So there's a quick video that, well, it's about 8 minutes, but we're starting it halfway through and we're not watching the whole thing. It's about time zones around the world and interesting ones, but we'll only watch this part about the international date line because you'll see how wacky it is going through the ocean.
few minutes. Next up is how weird the international dateline looks in the Pacific. Again, in theory, the international dateline would be a straight line with a 24-hour time difference on either side of it. While the Pacific here is mostly empty, there are a few islands and land chunks that curve the line pretty dramatically in some places. Like here in Samoa, where the government decided to completely skip December 30th, 2011 and move the country forward an entire day. Besides them not liking LeBron and wanting to skip his birthday, the other reason they decided to do that was because way back in 1892, the Samoan king moved the country east of the dateline in order to be closer connected to the US. But over 100 years since then, Samoa's economy grew closer to Australia and New Zealand instead, despite being 21 hours ahead in time from Sydney. So in 2011, they changed it back to how things were before 1892. But this created another awkward situation in neighboring American Samoa just 70 kilometers away, which stuck with being east of the dateline, which makes a 24-hour time difference between them and a 25-hour time difference in the summer. But even weirder is this monstrosity in Kiribati, where the dateline lunges out 2,000 miles to surround it before coming back to relatively normal. This situation means that you could start in Hawaii on a Monday, travel south and end up in Tuesday, and if you kept going south, you'd end up back in Monday. This also means that at some point every day, there exists 3 days going on at the same time in different parts of the world. When it's 6:30 a.m. in New York on Saturday, it's 11:30 p.m. in American Samoa on Friday, and it's 12:30 a.m. in Christmas Island, Kiribati on Sunday. But perhaps the weirdest time zone change you can ever experience is
Okay, and then it goes on and talks about the states a little bit. There's some interesting ones there too. So kind of funny that, there can be one country next to another that's 70 kilometers away from each other, but it's got a 24-hour time difference. And that's what happens when you cross the dateline. If you've ever flown across the dateline, at least from Canada and going west, you'll know that one of your days disappears. And on the way back, your day is really, really long. So when I flew the first time from Canada to Tokyo, I completely missed a day. I left on the 21st of November, 2008, and I got there on the 23rd. The 22nd disappeared for me that year. So it's a funny thing, the time difference, but it is important to look at. And when you're in Apollo, for example, you'll see, let's say if you book YYZ FRA, like Toronto to Frankfurt, there will be a little +1, meaning you'll arrive the next day. If you go the other way, like if you typed in, for example, Vancouver to Sydney on a Qantas flight, you'll see +2 in some cases because you'll have to go 2 days in advance to get there. So we will take a look first at Fiji, one of the South Pacific islands. So let's zoom in there, get rid of my picture. And this is Fiji. So a couple different things to mention about Fiji. First of all, the capital is Suva, as you can see on the map with our star. Suva does have an airport, but it's not the one that most international flights land in. It's actually over here in Nadi. So that's where the major gateway is Nadi on the west side of the island. Airport code is NAN. Flight carrier is Fiji Airways. And a couple of facts, the country's made up of 333 islands, but people don't live on 223 of those. And what we're looking at here, the biggest island that has both the capital city on the east and the major gateway on the west, it's called Viti Levu. And that's where my mouse is here. It's the biggest island in Fiji, and it has about 70% of the country's population. And that population typically lives on the outer edges of the island. And the reason is because the inside is just a bit too wild. It's hard to get around. There's forests and mountains and things. Mount Victoria is the highest point in the country. It's now called Mount Tomanivi, so not Mount Victoria anymore. And that, of course, follows the movement globally, where things are being returned to their original names. So the island is 146 kilometers long by 106 kilometers wide, so not huge really. It does have a mountain range kind of in the middle, running from north to south. And in that part of the world, weather in general travels east to west. So all of the systems kind of go this way, which kind of is opposite up here in Canada. But the reason is, so not the reason, but what that ends up doing is because there's a mountain range in the middle, the weather comes up, let's say from the southeast and hits the island, and all the moisture is dumped on the right side, on the east side of the island, because there's a mountain range. And then they have what they call a rain shadow on the west side. So in that case, the east is really wet. There's rainforests, there's lots of activity, precipitation. On the west, it's drier. And that's why more tourists go to Nadi, because they don't typically look for rain when tourists travel. They speak Fijian Hindu, and English there. And a fun fact is that walking on hot stones originated in Fiji. So we'll take a quick look at Suva, quick look over at Nadi, quick look at how to climb Mount Taumanidi. But first, we'll watch our Fiji tourism video.
Ooh, ooh,
Mara ue so tabi iko.
Maraw,
Mara ue so tabi iko.
It's funny, the whole world is searching for happiness. Here, it finds you.
Unmute myself. Okay, so we're back to looking at Viti Levu, the biggest island, the most populated island in Fiji. And here you can see the topography of it. So the mountain range in the middle, over here is where you've got Nadi. It's the drier side. Over here on the east is where you've got Suva, and that's the wetter side of everything. What it's known for overall, rainforests, mountains, as you can see, sand dunes, which are about here in the southwest of the country, and waterfalls. So there are a few maps that I found that are kind of interesting. They're a little difficult to read, so I'll explain them to you as we look at them. So the map that we just saw is now on the right. On the left is a population map. But the top of the brown does not represent people. It says in the text, but the text is hard to read. There's not a whole lot of visually nice to look at, easy to understand maps when it comes to population of Fiji, believe it or not. But I found this one and I thought I'd explain. So the population you can see is clustered along the edges. So this is the capital population, is Suva and around it. And then on the west, you have the population that's around Nadi and the more touristy areas, including the sand dunes down here and the major airport, which is about there. And then the next map is precipitation, or in this case, rain. And because I imagine it doesn't snow too much there, maybe on the mountaintops only. So blue is the wetter areas, red is the drier areas. So now you can see how when the weather comes up from the southeast, it hits that mountain range right along the center of the island and dumps all of the precipitation where the waterfalls and rivers come from. Some of those rivers and waterfalls end up going to the west as well. But you can see over on the west how dry it is, and that's what the tourists are typically looking for when they travel. So we'll start and kind of focus around Suva for now, the capital area. So Suva is known for the hiking trails. Remember, now we're on the more wet, the rainforesty side. So you've got swimming, bird watching, tropical flora. And this is part of a global, let's say, initiative called the Queen's Commonwealth Canopy. So I think in almost every, maybe in every, I think, but almost every Commonwealth country participates in this Queen's Commonwealth Canopy. And that's where we plant a bunch of trees, and it's a conservation initiative. So designating areas as safe, as places where you're not allowed to harvest trees, chop down trees, things like that. Ours here in Canada, part of the canopy is Great Bear Rainforest in BC, but that's just an interesting fact. The Koloisuva Forest Park in Fiji is part of this initiative, and it's on the Suvan side, so on the east side, which is why it's so lush and so green. Then we have what used to be called Mount Victoria, and you can see that on the old sign, which is at the summit of the mountain, Mount Victoria, but now it's called Mount Tomanivi. And in order to start climbing that, you will visit the Nevi village. So that's something you'll want to take a little note of. So you can climb it. It is really, really difficult, but it's only 2 hours. But it's really challenging. So there's at the bottom of it, it's very muddy. There are streams. You have to go over boulders, which are really big rocks, tree roots, cliffs and things. And you do need to hire a guide, and you have to pay an admission fee, which is not terribly expensive. You can see the exchange rate there is about 12 Canadian for the guide and the same for the admission. But if you did want to climb this mountain, the highest mountain in Fiji, you'd have to go to the Nevi village and then start from there. I also mentioned down in the southwest corner of the country, there's sand dunes, and you can find sand dunes lots of places in the world. Usually in deserts, like in the Namibian desert that we talked about when we looked at Sossusvlei, Namibia, with those huge big sand dunes. This is kind of the same idea, but it's not in the middle of a desert. It's you've got a city and greenery and forests on one side, and then you have a big bunch of sand dunes, and then water, the ocean. So it's kind of interesting. It is a national park. It was Fiji's first national park, designated in 1989. And because sand dunes shift and change with the wind and over time, there are things that are found underneath these sand dunes, including burial sites and pottery from over 2,000 years old. And these sand dunes are anywhere from 20 to 60 meters tall. So here's a video, not mine. But looking at the video, you can see we're definitely not in a desert like you might see at the sand dunes in Namibia. There's a lot of greenery in a small town. And then when you go over, there's huge sand dunes and then the ocean. So in this case, it's kind of like a beach with hills. And then to the right, I'm not sure if this guy pans over anymore, but you've got the ocean. When we get into these more exotic, more secluded areas, it's harder to find videos that show what I want to show, because less and less people go to these places. But that's kind of what makes it fun about studying these areas. So that was Fiji. We are now going to go over to French Polynesia. And as the name might suggest, they speak French there, but it is an independent territory, which means they have their own capital city. Oh, cool. I got a nice direct message saying that there's something like that in Brazil as well. And I assume it's the sand dunes. Yes, in the middle of a forest sort of area. Incredible to see in person, the sand dunes with the water and the greenery. It is unique. You don't see that very often in the world. Sadly, I didn't see that when I went to Brazil. I was only able to go to Rio and Iguazu Falls, which was fine. They were pretty amazing, but
Yeah, but
that's
it's
really cool.
unimaginable. It's an incredible feeling. I don't know. It felt like I was in the middle of a desert, but I looked around and there were like macaws flying around and the sunset in the forest. It was something I can never believe was possible. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, you expect to see them in like the deserts, for example, but when they're kind of that close to everything else, it's pretty remarkable. So French Polynesia, now we've zoomed in and you can see it's kind of a scattering of islands. Most people will know it for two things. Bora Bora is the most famous island. It's the most famous destination, but some people also might know it as Tahiti. So the capital is Papeete. The airport code is PPT. Flag carrier is Air Tahiti Nui, and that code is TN. The largest island is Tahiti, and that's why sometimes the country is known as Tahiti. It is home to the famous Bora Bora, but Bora Bora is not the capital city. So that's something you'll remember for your test next week as well. Bora Bora is not the capital. Papeete is the capital. And as the name might imply, they do speak French there. And as I've mentioned already, the country can be known as Tahiti. So we're going to zoom in and take a look at these places. But first, we'll take a look at the video from the tourism board. And it is called French Polynesia, but it's known as Tahiti so frequently that even the tourism board will call it Tahiti. And you'll see that in this video.
There are many sides to the islands of Tahiti. There is big and small, day and night. There is warm and there is cool. In our islands, you can connect and disconnect. You can hide. You can seek. The wonderful thing is, with all of these different sides to our islands, there is a single word that can describe it and define it. A single word that can paint the tapestry of our islands, our people, our history, and our culture. That word is mana. Mana is the life force and spirit that surrounds the soul. You can see it, hear it, touch it, and taste it. And if you pause just long enough, you will smell its sweet scent too. Nowhere in the world is mana more present, more touched, more experienced, more loved than right here. The islands of Tahiti, embraced by mana.
Sorry, I was on mute for a while. I love these words that some places around the world have, like this Tahiti has mana. It kind of embraces all of these different feelings and these ideas that they have there. And Kia ora was from last week in New Zealand, and huga in Norway means kind of the same idea, and in Sweden. It's like warmth and just being with friends and having a good experience. So yeah, as you can see in that video, Tahiti or French Polynesia is sometimes called Tahiti, even by their own tourism board. And it's because the biggest island is called Tahiti. It's when you think of destination Europe and you studied the Netherlands, lots of the time in English we'll refer to that as Holland, but really Holland is just two provinces of the Netherlands. So it's kind of the same idea. And that's why, again, I mentioned in the first week, geography is not just black and white. There's not this answer or that answer. Sometimes things can be different and change around a little, and that's okay. So here we are in French Polynesia or in Tahiti, and now we're in Bora Bora, airport code BOB, B-O-B. This is kind of like the absolute ultimate destination for luxury, beachy travel. So if people want sunshine, they want a beach, and they're quite rich, then they'll come in and ask you for Bora Bora if you're a travel agent, or if you are wealthy enough to go, then that's probably on your bucket list as well. So it is the ultimate oasis. Fun fact is that there's no snakes. Now, like I said at the beginning, with most of these different island destinations, or at least all of the ones we're studying today, it can be expensive to get there. And then once you're there, it can be expensive to stay. So the accommodation can be quite pricey. I sent 2 couples there. Each of them were having a honeymoon when I was working at the flight center, and they each paid about $10,000. That's per person for about a week. And once you get there, it's not all inclusive. You can pay extra for meal packages, but it's not all inclusive. So that's just your accommodation, transportation, and perhaps transfers, which is when you take passengers or travelers from one place to another. You may need to take a flight close to Bora Bora and then a boat, depending on the day, because they don't fly there every day from Papeete. And so it can be difficult to get to, but that's why people like it, because they're looking for that more secluded, off the beaten path type of destination. So if you haven't seen pictures of it already, this is what brings people to Bora Bora, what they call overwater bungalows. And that's this type of accommodation here. They do have accommodation on the coast, like on the mainland, but what attracts people are these overwater bungalows. So this is where, as you can imagine, for $10,000 per person per week, this is where the rich and famous are, or maybe just rich people, but we don't know who they are. So the famous people who have stayed here in Bora Bora, I think people like Jennifer Aniston, Jimmy Kimmel, Courtney Cox, Justin Bieber, who now has Timbits named after him from what I've seen on the news. You can see the caliber, the type of people who go here, and it's really because it's very expensive. And there's a status thing about going, of course. When something is this expensive, you can kind of brag about it in a way. So when you're looking at the accommodation, there are some that are on the coast. You might have some that are closer, like these ones might be actually not over the water, for example. Those ones are around the cheaper, within that bracket, the cheaper side. So $800 US a night. And then the overwater bungalows, the bigger, the more expensive, of course. Some of them have glass floors or water slides and things like that, going down, snorkel gear and whatever. And that's going to get up to 1,200 plus per night US dollars. And those glass floors are becoming more and more popular. And this is a picture of those overwater bungalows facing back towards the mainland. And this is a hotel called Le Méridien. And if you write that down, you don't need to know this for the test or anything, but if you write down that name of the hotel and take a look and even just go to the website, Le Méridien Bora Bora, type in a couple dates and see how much it would be to stay there. But I mean, people do have that money and people come in, or at least when I was a travel agent, people came in and asked for it. So it is a good idea to be aware of these hotels, what they do offer. And when you do see the price, maybe it's shocking to you, but it's not shocking to some people. So we learned over and over and over at the travel agency that people might have more money than you think. And people don't always look at the price first. So you just need to ask some questions. And I'm not sure if you've had a sales course yet, if that's past or this semester or maybe next. But sales is all about questioning, asking the right questions at the right time. And part of your questioning can be, you can say, what's your budget? You can say that. You have to be careful who you say it to. But other ways of asking that same question is, have you seen anything already that interests you? And then they'll say, oh yeah, we've been looking at Bora Bora. Or, oh yes, we've been looking at Cuba. Huge difference in price. So it just comes down to the asking of the questions when it comes to sales. Oh, perfect. Okay, you've already had your sales course. Good. Yeah, almost every position in the travel industry is a sales position, even if you're working for airlines or accommodation or as a travel agent. Of course, that's a sales job, but there will always be, not always, but most of the time there will be targets and things. If you find yourself in tourism marketing, maybe there won't be as many sales targets, but lots of the positions out there are sales positions. So here we're at the Le Méridien, and this is where they have that beautiful glass floor in that overwater bungalow. So beautiful way to wake up, really. Go out those doors, go for a little dip in the ocean. And this is actually the hotel that has the largest glass floor in French Polynesia. So now we're moving on, still in French Polynesia, to Moorea, which is also a fancy, expensive place to be. Water is a little bit different. You can see that there are some coral, maybe aquatic plant life of some sort, but that's what makes it interesting because that's what attracts fish. And so you might be more interested to stay there if you're into fishing. Or not fishing, fish viewing. You wouldn't want to fish for those beautiful tropical fish, probably. This is a bit different from Bora Bora. It's known for its jagged mountains, sandy beaches, still has overwater bungalows, but just like Fiji was difficult to navigate the interior of it, same with Moorea. Some of the peaks of Moorea have never been climbed. No one's ever climbed these peaks. It's not especially overrun with tourists, and that's with French Polynesia in general, with Tahiti in general. So about 50,000 to 70,000 tourists visit French Polynesia every year. Those numbers are pre-COVID. And when you think back, and we've looked at tourism numbers in certain other places, like when we looked at the difference between South and North Korea. South Korea gets millions and millions of tourists every year. So you kind of get the idea that in French Polynesia, there's very few tourists. It looks like a lot when you think 50,000, 70,000, that's quite a bit. It's not, especially when you can compare it to other places, even other islands. Okay, so we're leaving from South Pacific for a moment to take a look at our next destination. And here we are back looking at our map of Asia. And because this is island potpourri, we didn't study this when we looked at India, Sri Lanka, and you'll see as we go through different islands. And this is why it's island potpourri. We're kind of jumping around the globe a little bit, but let's go to the Maldives. You can see here they're located southwest of India and Sri Lanka, and they're really, really spread out. So when you look at a map, this is the Maldives. And I've put there zoom in, and that's for you. You should know this by now, but when you're looking at these maps in these PowerPoints, they're really, really high definition. So you can zoom in really, really quite a bit and they will be high definition. So if you zoom into there, you'll see the islands we'll take a look at today. But Maldives is an island nation, like I said, southwest of India and Sri Lanka. Capital is Malé. Flag carrier is Maldivian. And this is an airline which has a number in its code. So remember that airports are always 3 letters. And same with, so airport codes, also city codes are, excuse me, 3 letters. Airlines can be numbers or letters, and there's 2. So I will talk about your module test at the end of today's class, but you will need to know both airlines and airports for this coming one, and they will be on the same question. So you know where it's the drop down. Choose the airport code for Sydney, and then you've got options in a drop down menu. Those will be airline codes and airport codes. So just remember that airline codes are always 2, let's say, digits, always, or 2 characters, always a letter and a number, or 2 letters or 2 numbers. It's not often when they have numbers, but it does happen. Like Jet Airways, I think I don't know if we studied that when we looked at India, but that one had a number too. Anyway, Maldivian is the flag carrier and the airline code is Q2. It is considered part of Asia, as you can tell by where the map showed it was, and it's known for its culture, its beaches, lots of greenery, lots of important landmarks. And before we zoom in and take a look at these specific islands in the box, of course, we need to take a look at our tourism video.
Was it the voice? Was it the fire burning in me? All of the noise turned into choirs of harmony. Left me with the pieces of forever that you broke. But since you left me low, I've been high. Of harmony left me with the pieces of forever that you broke. But since you left me low, I've been high. I've been high. Lately I've been
Okay, so that one was not made by a tourism agency, but beautiful imagery anyway. So now we're zooming in and we're looking at Malé, which is the capital of the Maldives. And the top picture, first of all, shows you one of my favorite things to do while I'm traveling is to go to a market. And I love the markets. There's so many colors and smells and things to see and frankly to buy. The bottom picture is the island of Malé. It is pretty remarkable. You can see it's quite small. It is very densely populated. It's the 5th most densely populated place in the world, and it's one of the smallest capital cities as well. It is home to 1/3 of the population of the Maldives. And what there is to do there is there's markets and as you can see, it's quite easy to get around. It's very compact. So you can also take a tour. You can take a walking tour, which can take you anywhere from 2 to 4 hours and show you all the different sites and things that there are to see and appreciate. One of the places I like to look when I'm searching for tours to do myself or anything really, clients or just I sometimes put together fake itineraries for myself to create a trip and organize it all and then never do it. But Airbnb experiences. So Airbnb has two sides to it. You've got the accommodation side and then the experiences side. And locals will take you around, and whether it might be a cooking class or a walking tour or horseback riding on the beach, I mean, the list goes on. There's endless possibilities on that website. But if you're ever interested in a place, it's something interesting to take a look at. So, for example, if you went to Malé and on Airbnb's experiences website, you might see some of these tours that a local will host and take you around. Interesting way to see it. So, really short visit for us in the Maldives. All you need to know is that the capital is Malé. So they start with the same 3 letters, kind of easy for now to remember. It's going to get complicated when we look at our next destination. But Maldives is the country, capital city is Malé. Okay. Next, we're going to go to the Seychelles. Let's zoom in. It looks like Seychelles. It's pronounced Seychelles, kind of like that country in the South Pacific we talked about last week. That looks like it would be called Kiribati, but it's pronounced Kiribati. This is Seychelles, and here we are in the Seychelles. Couple different things to look at. The capital city is Victoria. That's also the major gateway. Airport code is SEZ. The country is made up of 115 islands. We're going to take a look at just 3 of them today. The 3 biggest ones kind of that you see here. We're going to up to Praslin Island and La Digue, which is there. If you're looking at this map and noticing certain things, it can be confusing when you're looking at Seychelles because the word Anse, A-N-S-E, could be pronouncing it wrong, who knows? That means cove. So cove, Royale, Cove Bueno, etc. And Grand Anse, of course, just means Grand Cove. But there's more than one Grand Anse. I think there's 3, and they're all on different islands. So it can get a little complicated. So if you're looking for a beach, if you have clients looking for a beach or people asking you for advice looking for a beach, then look for the word Anse because it's a cove, it's more secluded and it's going to be a nice private beach. Yes, there are 3 Grand Anse beaches in Seychelles and they're all on different islands. So that can be a little complicated at times. So circling the city Victoria now, that's the capital. We'll take a look at what's there. We're going up to Praslin Island as well, and then over to La Digue Island, which are all known for different things. And bear with me, we have our last tourism video of the class for today. Here we go.
We asked you to dream the journey of a lifetime to a place of endless beauty. From lush vegetation to clear turquoise waters and sandy beaches. Our friendly people have been dreaming too, to welcome you to the safest environment possible. experience Seychelles. Our home, your sanctuary.
Muted myself. Now I have. Okay. So this is where I said it gets complicated earlier when we were looking at Maldives. So Maldives' capital city is Malé. Remember, because the first three letters are the same. Maldives, Malé. Now we are in Seychelles, and the capital city, Victoria, which we're looking at in this picture, is on the island of Mahé. So, kind of like when we looked at Fiji and we looked at the specific island names, we're now looking at Seychelles, and the island name is Mahé Island. The capital city, Victoria, is on that island, and it's the capital, Victoria is the capital city of Seychelles. But where it gets complicated is because Mahé is one letter different than Malay, so just make sure you know the difference, that one for the test. So Mahé Island is home to Victoria, which is one of the smallest capital cities in the world. It's only 20 kilometers squared, so it's quite small. And what you're seeing in the picture is a clock tower, which is surprisingly not surprisingly called Victoria Clock Tower, but it's locally known as Lor Laws. It was built, of course, to commemorate Queen Victoria, after whom the city is named. So it is home to 1/3 of the population of Seychelles. And I've already mentioned this, but just make sure you know the difference. Malé, Mahé, it's just one letter difference, but they are different places. One is a city, one is an island. Malé is the capital city of the Maldives, and Mahé is the island in Seychelles where the capital city is located. So also in Mahé is this incredible temple. This is the only Hindu temple in Seychelles. It was built in 1992, and you can see the name of it there. I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but it's a quite beautiful thing. Now we're leaving from Mahé Island. We're going up to Praslin Island, which, when you remember on the map, is a bit north, maybe a little bit east as well of Mahé Island. So we're looking at Praslin Island. And this is where they have a beach that is commonly voted one of the most beautiful beaches in the world. So you can get to this island by a speed ferry from Mahé. It takes about 50 minutes, but you can also fly for 15 minutes. So it's a little bit more expensive to fly, of course. Vallée de Mai, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Nature Park, is there. And in that nature park is called the Enselatio Beach. And that's the beach that's voted, that has been voted the most beautiful beach multiple times. And that's what's in the picture here. Now, question for you. As we look at the rest of this UNESCO heritage site, the Mai Valley, Vallée de Mai, that boy is holding something. Can you guess what that is?
I want to say a macadamia. Something
Yeah,
like that.
that's not far off, actually. We've got lots of good guesses here. Macadamia was mentioned, so that's a type of nut. Macadamia nut, a mushroom, a pumpkin. So the closest guess would be a nut. It's actually the world's largest seed. So it's called the coco de mer, the palm tree, and it has the world's largest seed. So that's a seed that sprouts these palm trees, the coco de mer palm trees. And so what you're seeing in the picture at the top is the result of these seeds. And that is in the Vallée de Mai, and that's the UNESCO World Heritage Site. So we've talked a lot about UNESCO in this class, and sometimes there are things that are natural, sometimes there are things that are cultural. They do certify both, and that's why there's lots and lots of UNESCO World Heritage Sites across the world. It stands for the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, I think. I should have looked that up before I said it so confidently. The E might be ecological, but I'm not sure. But anyway, it is a United Nations system, which includes almost every country in the world. So that's why we see these sites in so many different countries, these UNESCO sites. And that's also why they can be cultural, they can be natural, they can be educational, they can be a couple different types of categories. Some of them are quite obvious, some of them are discrete. Uluru, for example, in Australia, that's quite obvious. It's a big thing to look at. Some of them are more obscure in the sense that you can't really say, I visited that, but just kind of off topic, but a fun fact. Mexican cuisine, like Mexican cooking, traditional Mexican food is UNESCO listed, which is kind of unique because not many places can say that their food is so special it's UNESCO listed. So our last video for the day is not a tourism video, but it is about this beautiful beach that we just looked at. And as you watch the video, it'll zoom out and you can see La Digue Island in the background. So this is that beautiful beach on Lazio Beach. And as you zoom out, this is a drone video, just about a minute long. And if you can hear me, I'm not sure, but that island back there is La Digue, and that's where we're going next. Well, you get the idea. So yes, it's not too far further to get to La Digue, and look how cool it looks. Those rocks are so beautiful. And the same ferry that takes you from Mahe Island up to Praslin Island can continue on an additional 15 minutes and you'll get to La Digue. And that's where surfers like to go because the waves that are around that island are huge. And so people like to go there. The other thing people like about it is that it's pedestrian only or no large vehicles like cars. Everybody bikes and walks. Animals are free to roam around, like chickens and dogs and wild animals like that, but also tortoises. You can see just kind of make themselves at home there as well. So that's about it for our island chat, our island potpourri chat. There's a couple things I want to mention before you go that have to do with next week's test and just what there is to do before next week in general. So first, of course, complete your activity on Canvas. That will help you when it comes to the test next week. Complete the reading and the questions, and module number 3. Test is next week. So the pages for those readings will be on the learning plan. There was just too much to type in here and make it look nice still. So a couple things to talk about before next week. The first thing you can do at any time, and that is the course feedback survey. So this comes out at the end of every semester. It's where it's your opportunity to give anonymous feedback about what can be improved with the course, whether that's the actual instruction or the content or anything else you can think of. Keep it constructive, but if you'd like to be critical, that's fine as well. Make sure it's constructive criticism. I've probably said it before, I taught in the public school system, so I can take anything you want to tell me, but make sure it's constructive and not about whatever you don't like my shirt or something. But I do read every single comment. I do read every reply. It is anonymous. I don't know who wrote what. And I take your feedback and improve for future semesters. And that is open for you now. You will have received an email about that, or you can find that survey on My Mohawk or My Canvas. There are 3 ways to find it. So email, My Canvas, My Mohawk. Next week, you have your module test number 3. That's your final test. It's kind of like your final exam. And that will take place during class time. So next week from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, we will not meet on Zoom, but I will still be at my computer in case you have any questions. What is on the test? I will quickly show you something. Okay, I don't remember if I showed you this last week, to be honest, but this is your module test number 3 review. So just like you had review for your module 2 test in the form of a PowerPoint, it's the same thing with this module 3 test. So go ahead to Canvas. This will be visible shortly after class. You can download it, but make sure you open it in presentation mode. So in the top left of your PowerPoint screen, make sure to click this button there where my mouse is and the red circle is. And that way you can move through the slides properly. It won't work if you're not in presentation mode. So a couple things to look at. Remember, you'll need to know the Australian state and territory capitals. And the way that this works is everything is kind of grayed out except the state that you're supposed to choose the capital of. So New South Wales, the capital is Sydney, and then you progress to the next state. Northern Territory, let's say I thought the capital was Hobart. I get it wrong, I go back to the beginning of that section. So that's how you'll get through that section. And remember what are the capitals of each state and territory and the capital of the country as well. So you might even see a question on the test that says, what is not a capital? What is not a state capital of Australia? And a different name will be written than these ones. So make sure you know that you're familiar with them quite well. The other thing I wanted to say, I mentioned during the class today, was that you'll need to know the airport codes and the airline codes that we studied, and they'll be part of the same question. The test is worth 39 points. 17 of those points come from the matching section. So it's really important to know which airlines match which codes. 3 of them are on your screen now. And then which airport codes are for which cities. And you'll get 17 points out of 39 if you do that accurately. The last question of the test is the same as the previous 2 module tests. Exactly the same. Where would you like to go? That we studied in class. What brings you there? Remember to put the airport code. Lots of people forgot that last time. And an interesting fact, just remember you're really reading that question really carefully and answering everything about it. That's worth 5 points as well. So between the airline codes, airport codes, and the last question, you'll have 22 points out of the 39. So make sure you can identify those airline codes, airport codes. So I got a question in the chat about the capital of, you can download this and go through it on your own. The capital of Australia, you can call it Canberra, that's fine. You can call it the Australian Capital Territory. On the test, you'll see it written as Canberra. So that's just so you clear that up. Just like Module 2 test review, you have some airline codes or airport codes to look at as well. So same thing as before, the name that you need to identify is at the top, Sydney, so then you'll click SID. Darwin, you'll click Darwin. Auckland, you'll click Auckland. If you're wrong, it goes back to the beginning. So make sure that you can go through all of these airport code slides without making a mistake, and you'll be absolutely fine for the quiz. It is, or the test, it is in a drop-down format. So it'll say cans on one side, for example, like it says here, and then you go over to the other side and match it with CNS. So all of these will come up on the test and those 3 airline codes you saw previously. Okay, otherwise it's similar to those other tests or test reviews that we had. Click on the island where you'd find the capital of New Zealand. So north or south, you can click the appropriate one. Hopefully you see the yes slide. Same thing with Milford Sound and so on. So I really just wanted to show you this, the airline or the airport code section. Make sure you know those 3 airlines as well that we looked at before in this module test review. And to remind you that the last question will be similar to the first 2 module tests. Another question, are the airline codes all from these 2 weeks? I believe it's just what's in the module test review. I will double check right now though. Maybe I should stop sharing my screen so I don't show you the test. Let's see. I know we saw some different ones from this week. But I think there's only the 3 that were in the module test review PowerPoint, but let me check. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there's only the 3 that are in the module test review. So make sure you know those 3, but then all of those airport codes from the review as well. And that will add up to 17 points. And then your 5-point question, which is always the last one. Where do you want to go that we studied this module? So that can be either Australia, New Zealand, or any of those islands. And what's bringing you there? Why do you want to go? What's the airport code? What's an interesting fact? And then you'll be fine for the test after that. Once again, it's next week from 5 to 7 Ontario time. And I'll be at my computer in case you have any issues connecting. If you do have issues connecting, first try to exit and go back into Lockdown browser. If that still doesn't work, restart your computer. If that doesn't work, then email me. Most of the questions I get by email during the test can be solved those ways. Okay, that's it. That's it for this course. That's it. Well, I mean, you have your test, but we won't see each other online for Destination World. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for coming out all of these weeks. Thank you for participating. And for some of you, I hope to see you next semester in person. I will be able to attach names to faces. You will no longer be virtual for me. You're welcome. And good luck with everything next week. And if you need anything, you can email me if you have questions before the test or during, or after for that matter. But that's it for today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And see you in the 4th semester or in the industry or wherever. Bye, everybody.